Hi out there. It has been a hot minute since I've done any posting to YouTube. I've had a lot going on in terms of the beginning stages of my book being published. So, looking at marketing, looking at getting it into bookstores, libraries, events. Most importantly, this is all about all of you. So, it's going to show up wonky as I show it in front of the camera, but it really is looking at ways that this can be accessible for you. But as I've been reading and recording Heart Wide Open for the audiobook version, it's been a real throwback and immersion into what inspired the book in the first place. And what that is about giving people a new way of thinking about narcissism, as well as a very structured, holistic way of healing. So, just a little bit about that, just a little bit of a teaser. But what I'm dropping in to talk about today is something that's coming up more and more in the last 5 years, and that is estrangement. So, more specifically, I'm referring to people in their 60s, 70s, even 80s who are really suffering as a result of being estranged from their adult children. And this does live in the realm of narcissistic family systems. It has a little bit to do with that, but it isn't always the reason. So, hang on while I'm just going to adjust the light here. It's a bit too much. There are so many reasons why there may be estrangement between a parent and a child. The first one I'm going to refer to is one I'm a little bit opinionated about, which is the misguided and sometimes inaccurate advice that if you go into conflict with someone, you should simply go no contact with them. Right? And I have a chapter about going no contact in the book called Going No Contact: The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So that's a typical scenario, is that someone, an adult child, rather than working through steps of conflict resolution or seeking help, goes out into the internet world. I know I'm being ironic, and makes a decision to go no contact. This is more common than we might think. That dovetails with what I'm about to say next, which is we have an entire generation of people, many of whom are more comfortable with information than communication and connection. And I'm going to say that again. I'm not going to call out which generation this is, but it rhymes with perennial. This group, in my observation, has a tendency to obsessively and compulsively research something, which is great. I do too. But they're not connecting, and there can be a value on that information more so than connection. Okay? What then goes along with this, perhaps, are aspects of parental alienation. So, for those of you who've had the misfortune of going through a high conflict divorce with a toxic person, with a narcissist, it is possible, if not probable, that you're estranged from an adult child because of the grooming and manipulation that happened with their parent, both when you were together and then when you separated and divorced. So it was the story the narcissist was telling your child or children about why you divorced, and that parental alienation when they're children then evolves into being estrangement. And I think time just makes things more difficult and more awkward. So I've just thrown a lot of information out there. Basically, I've talked about the three main reasons why estrangement is becoming more of a phenomenon, which is interesting because we have more ways now than ever of staying in touch, right? Further to that, of course, is geographic estrangement or geographic barriers, right? Kids are moving further away, or adult children are moving further away for work and starting their lives. Okay, jumping off of that point, then we have one I hear about a lot. When your adult child marries someone who has some type of character disorder and their toxic insecurity starts creating a distance between you and your child. This is a friggin' nightmare when this happens. And I have heard it a number of times. Um, they again, much like what happens in parental alienation, they start building a case against you. All right. The other way this plays out is, in heaven help you, if you don't take care of the grandchildren in the way that you are told to do. So this is another one that I've heard before, right? So maybe the parents are very much against processed food, and you give the grandchildren processed food, and that creates this power struggle that then results in this breakdown. Now, what I should have said at the beginning is, of course, much of this got stirred up at the beginning of the pandemic with disagreements around masking, who's in your circle, vaccines. I think that's still going on. Unfortunately, it's heartbreaking. It was actually the number one issue that I was seeing in the psychotherapy practice just after the pandemic. I was thinking, depression, anxiety. Oh, it was all about family conflict and estrangement based on COVID protocols, rules, and what standards people were living by. But I think that percolating underneath that are old attachment based patterns, old patterns of self esteem, and these this generation of adult children not feeling terribly heard or understood. This is a huge topic that could potentially be, an all day workshop. But I think that the longer you stay away from someone, the more you avoid that conversation, the harder it will be to reconcile. And so avoidance, of course, is another issue, right? So we have another, again, generationally, and I'm hugely opinionated about this. Much of this generation struggles with social skill, assertiveness. It's not their fault. And I'm not generalizing this. Really, I think this is like specific little pockets of people rather than everybody. But lacking that confidence, that skill, that connection to their heart, right? To reach out and say, this is stupid. And we have a generation of their parents who's just desperately trying to do the right thing and bargaining and coming in and out of phases of being fearful and sad and angry and fearful and sad and angry and not knowing what to do. And I'm sure they have their part in this. There's no doubt in my mind, right? I think that the most important starting point for any of you parents who are estranged from a child or children is to start to cultivate some compassion and some empathy for what your child might be going through. And that becomes your basic building block for opening up that window of communication, right? Just that tiny little step. It's, it's not unlike if you have a stray cat and you're trying to befriend it. That might be a horrible analogy, but you're building trust, right? You're building up that trust again. Often people talk about communication being an issue, commitment being an issue, but what we're really talking about is trust, right? How much trust there is. So, and trust is breached when an attachment connection is breached or there's a profound misunderstanding. I have chosen to go no contact with a family member intentionally in order to get clarity, in order to work through my anger and grief and the feelings of betrayal, in order to get anchored into my own truth and authenticity, and to not keep returning back to a toxic, low vibrational dynamic that was harming me. So I was very intentional about that. If you go no contact and you can't find your way back from that, that's when there is that risk of estrangement. Now, exceptions to the rule here. If you have been harmed physically, sexually, financially, psychologically by a parent, or your child has done that to you, then estrangement might represent a needed healthy boundary. So I really wanted to just drop in and offer a preliminary peek into this topic. Please bring some questions. It is my call to action to get people thinking more differently about narcissism and toxic family patterns and understanding things from a more heart-centered, holistic perspective rather than a wounded victim perspective. But if my message resonates, like, share, subscribe, join the conversation. And if I do get questions, comments, I am more than happy to come back in and spend a little bit more time on this topic. So if you've experienced this, my heart goes out to you. And I do hope you find your way. I do have great faith in, of course, therapy, but definitely mediation as well as a way of finding your way back to that family connection. Thank you for listening. Take good care. Bye-bye.